Homeless at 22, with just $10 left. Lucy Caldwell made a decision that shocked everyone. Instead of buying food, instead of finding a place to sleep, she bought an abandoned windmill. Yes, completely broken, falling apart, left to rot for decades. People thought she was crazy. Some even said she wouldn't survive a single night inside. But what she built inside that windmill, no one saw coming. Not the people who doubted her, not the man who sold it to her, not even Lucy herself. Because what started as desperation turned into something so powerful, so unexpected, that it left everyone speechless. And if you think this is just another survival story, wait until you see what's hidden inside. At just 22 years old, Lucy Caldwell had already lost everything. No home, no family to call, no safety net waiting to catch her, just 10 crumpled dollars in her pocket and a cold, unforgiving night closing in fast. She stood alone on the edge of a forgotten dirt road, staring at a towering, broken windmill that looked like it could collapse at any moment. Its blades hung lifeless against the gray sky, creaking with every gust of wind like a warning. Most people would have walked away. Some wouldn't even dare get closer. But Lucy didn't have that luxury. That windmill wasn't just abandoned, it was her last chance. Her only chance. With trembling hands and a racing heart, she made a decision that no one in their right mind would make. She spent her final $10, not on food, not on shelter for the night, but on this decaying structure everyone else had given up on. What happened next would leave people speechless, because hidden inside that broken windmill was the beginning of something no one saw coming. And if you think this is just another survival story, you're wrong. This is where everything changes. The wind cut through Lucy Caldwell's thin jacket as she stood in front of the abandoned windmill. Her fingers clenched tightly around the last $10 she had in the world. It wasn't just money. It was survival. A warm meal. A cheap motel room. One more night of temporary safety before facing the unknown again. Her stomach twisted painfully, reminding her how long it had been since she'd eaten properly. Every logical voice in her head screamed the same thing: walk away. But Lucy didn't move. Instead, her eyes stayed locked on the windmill. Up close, it looked even worse than she imagined. The wooden panels were cracked and peeling. Rust covered the metal joints like a disease slowly eating it alive. One strong storm, and the entire structure might collapse. It wasn't just abandoned, it was forgotten. Left behind like it never mattered. And somehow, that felt familiar. Lucy took a slow step forward, then another. "Why are you even considering this?" she whispered to herself, her voice trembling, because she had nothing left to lose. That realization didn't come as a thought. It hit her like a wave. Heavy, undeniable, terrifying, but strangely freeing. She had already lost her home, already lost stability, already been pushed to the edge where survival meant thinking differently. So why not this? Why not take the one thing everyone else saw as worthless and turn it into something more? A faint sound broke her thoughts. "Don't tell me you're actually thinking about buying that thing." Lucy turned to see an older man leaning against a dusty pickup truck nearby. His name was Elliot Hayes, the owner of the land, or at least what used to matter of it. His expression was a mix of disbelief and quiet amusement. "That windmill hasn't worked in decades," he continued, shaking his head. "Roof leaks, gears are shot. Whole place is one bad day away from falling apart." Lucy swallowed hard. "How much?" Elliot let out a short laugh, like he wasn't sure she was serious. "You don't want it." "I didn't ask that." Her voice, though soft, carried a firmness that surprised even her. "How much?" There was a pause. A long one. Elliot studied her now, not like she was crazy, but like he was trying to understand something deeper. Maybe he saw the desperation in her eyes. Or maybe he recognized the kind of determination that doesn't come around often. Finally, he sighed. $10. Lucy's breath caught. $10, exactly what she had left. For a moment, the world seemed to go silent. The wind, the creaking wood, even the ache in her stomach, it all faded into the background. This was it. Her last chance to choose. Food or a future. Safety for one night, or the possibility of something more. Her fingers tightened around the worn bill in her hand. She could already picture the alternative: walking away, finding a cheap meal, maybe a temporary place to sleep, waking up the next morning in the same cycle. Still lost. Still searching. Still surviving, but never living. Lucy looked back at the windmill. It stood there, broken and overlooked, yet still standing. Just like her. Her heart began to race. Not from fear, but from something else. Something stronger. Hope. Terrifying, fragile hope. What happens if it collapses? She asked quietly. Elliot shrugged. Then it collapses. No guarantees, no safety net, no backup plan. Just risk. Lucy let out a slow breath, her decision forming before she could stop it. Then I guess I'll fix it before it does. Elliot raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting that answer. You fix that. Lucy stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Her hands were shaking now, but her voice wasn't. I'm not asking if I can, she said. I'm deciding that I will. For a brief second, something shifted in Elliot's expression. The amusement disappeared, replaced by something quieter. Respect, maybe, or recognition. He reached out his hand. $10, and it's yours. Lucy stared at his hand. This was the moment everything would change or fall apart completely. There was no middle ground. Slowly, she opened her palm and looked down at the crumpled bill, the last piece of security she had left. Her safety, her comfort, her past, and without giving herself time to doubt, she placed it in his hand. The deal was done, just like that. Lucy Caldwell, homeless, broke, and alone, became the owner of a collapsing windmill. Elliot handed her a small, rusted key. Good luck, he said, though his tone suggested she would need more than luck. Lucy turned back toward the windmill, the key cold in her palm. For the first time in a long time, fear and excitement collided inside her chest. She had no tool, no plan, no idea where to even begin. But she had something she didn't have before. A place, a chance. And as she stepped toward the towering structure, one thought echoed louder than all the others. There's no going back now. The first night inside the windmill nearly broke Lucy Caldwell. The cold seeped through every crack in the walls, wrapping around her like ice. The air smelled of rust, damp wood, and years of abandonment. Every sound felt amplified: the groaning beams above her, the faint whistle of wind slipping through broken panels, the distant echo of something shifting deep inside the structure. She didn't sleep. Not really. Instead, she sat curled in a corner, arms wrapped tightly around herself, staring into the darkness and questioning everything. What have I done? That question repeated in her mind over and over again. She had no bed, no heat, no lights, no plan. Just a crumbling windmill and a decision she couldn't undo. By morning, reality hit harder than the cold ever could. Lucy stepped outside, her body aching, her stomach empty, her energy nearly gone. For a brief moment, doubt crept back in louder this time, more convincing. She could still walk away. No one would blame her. No one was even watching. But then she turned back and looked at the windmill again. And something shifted, because in the daylight, it didn't just look broken. It looked possible. Not easy, not safe, but possible. Lucy took a deep breath and made a silent promise to herself. If I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail trying. That's when everything began. With no tools and no money left, Lucy had only one option: use what the world had already thrown away. She started walking, miles at a time, along empty roads, behind abandoned buildings, near old farms and forgotten lots, anywhere people might have discarded something she could use. At first, it felt pointless. Scraps of wood too broken to hold weight. Rusted nails bent out of shape. Pieces of metal twisted beyond recognition. But Lucy didn't see trash anymore. She saw potential. A cracked plank became part of a future floor. A bent nail could be straightened and reused. A discarded metal sheet could block wind from tearing through the walls. Piece by piece, she carried everything back to the windmill, sometimes barely able to hold the weight, her hands blistering, her arms shaking. No one helped her. Most people didn't even stop. Some slowed down just long enough to stare confused, maybe even judgmental before driving away. To them, she probably looked like someone digging through ruins for no reason. But Lucy knew better. She wasn't scavenging. She was building. The real challenge came when she tried to fix her first wall. She had no experience, no training, no idea what she was doing. The first attempt collapsed within minutes. The second didn't hold either. By the third, frustration boiled over. Lucy stepped back, breathing hard, her hands trembling not from cold this time, but from exhaustion and doubt. "Why is this so hard?" she whispered, her voice cracking. Tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Because deep down, she knew the truth. This wasn't just about fixing a wall. This was about proving to herself that she could rebuild something when everything else had fallen apart. So she tried again, and again, and again. Each failure taught her something new. How to balance weight, how to reinforce weak points, how to think differently. Days turned into nights. Her hands became rough, covered in cuts and bruises. Her body screamed for rest. But slowly, almost invisibly at first, progress began to show. One wall stood, then another. A section of the roof stopped leaking. A small corner of the windmill became livable. It wasn't perfect, not even close, but it was hers. And then, just when she thought things couldn't get harder, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, as Lucy struggled to drag a heavy piece of timber back toward the windmill, she lost her grip. The wood slammed to the ground with a loud crack, echoing across the empty land. "Careful with that." The voice startled her. Lucy turned quickly to see a man standing a few feet away, arms crossed, watching her with a curious expression. It was Elliot. He hadn't come to check on her since the day she bought the windmill. Until now. "You're still here," he said, almost surprised. Lucy wiped the sweat from her forehead, trying to steady her breath. "I said I would be." Elliot glanced at the growing pile of materials, then at the parts of the windmill she had already managed to patch up. For a moment, he didn't say anything. And then, quietly, he muttered, "Didn't think you'd make it past the first night." Lucy gave a tired smile. "I almost didn't." There was a pause, a long one. Then Elliot stepped forward, nudging the fallen timber with his boot. "You're lifting it wrong," he said. "You'll throw your back out before you fix anything." Lucy frowned slightly. "I don't exactly have many options." Elliot sighed. shaking his head, or you could learn. That moment changed everything. Because for the first time since this began, Lucy wasn't completely alone anymore, and what started as survival was about to become something much bigger. At first, the windmill was nothing more than a place to survive. A roof barely holding. Walls patched together just enough to keep the wind out. A corner on the floor where Lucy Caldwell could finally rest without fearing the night. That was all she needed. Or at least, that's what she told herself. But something began to change. Slowly, quietly, almost without her noticing. It started one morning. Sunlight slipped through a narrow gap between the wooden panels, cutting a thin golden line across the dusty floor. Lucy sat there, exhausted, her back against the wall she had spent hours reinforcing the night before. She watched that beam of light stretch across the room, and for the first time, she didn't just see damage. She saw space. She stood up, her eyes following the light as it moved. The windmill didn't feel as suffocating as before. The walls didn't seem as broken. The silence didn't feel as empty. It felt unfinished, like something waiting to be completed. Lucy took a slow step forward, her fingers brushing against the rough wooden surface. "What if?" she whispered. That question changed everything. What if this wasn't just a place to hide? What if it could be something more? That day, Lucy stopped thinking like someone trying to survive, and started thinking like someone building a life. She began to look at every corner differently. The vertical height of the windmill. Not a problem, but an opportunity. Instead of seeing it as an awkward, narrow tower, she imagined levels. A sleeping area above, a small living space below, storage built into the walls. The broken windows, not just holes but openings for light. She adjusted their shape, positioning scrap materials to control the airflow while letting sunlight in. The rusted gears, not useless but powerful. With Elliot's guidance, she started cleaning them, slowly removing years of decay. And as the metal began to shine again, Lucy realized something incredible. This windmill wasn't dead. It had just been ignored. Just like her. The realization hit deeper than she expected. For so long, Lucy had seen herself the same way she first saw this place broken, abandoned, with nothing left to offer. But now, standing inside something she was rebuilding with her own hands, she began to question that belief. "Maybe I'm not starting from nothing," she murmured one evening, staring up at the structure above her. "Maybe I'm starting from something unfinished." That shift in thinking fueled everything she did next. She stopped rushing. Before, every action was driven by urgency. Fix it fast, patch it quickly, survive another night. Now, she slowed down. She measured. She planned. She imagined. Every piece of wood she placed wasn't just for function, it was for purpose. She carved out a small platform above the ground, creating a raised sleeping area where she could feel safe. She arranged the interior so movement felt natural, even within the tight space. She reinforced the walls not just to block wind but to hold warmth. For the first time, Lucy lit a small fire inside, carefully contained, the heat slowly filling the space. And as she sat there, watching the faint glow reflect off the wooden walls, it didn't feel like a shelter anymore. It felt like the beginning of a home. Days passed, and the transformation became undeniable. What once echoed with emptiness now carried a quiet sense of presence. The floor was no longer scattered with debris, it was organized. The walls no longer looked like they would collapse. They stood with intention. And Lucy? She no longer moved like someone lost. She moved with direction, with ownership. One afternoon, Elliot returned again, But this time, he didn't speak right away. He just stood at the entrance, looking around. His eyes scanned every detail, the reinforced beams, the structured layout, the subtle signs of care in every corner. "This," he said slowly, almost under his breath, "this isn't the same place." Lucy smiled faintly, wiping her hands on her worn jeans. "It's getting there." Elliot looked at her not with doubt this time, but something closer to disbelief. "You're not just fixing it," he said. "You're changing it." Lucy paused. Then she shook her head gently. "No," she replied softly. "I'm finally seeing it." There was a difference, a powerful one, because the windmill hadn't changed overnight. Her perspective had, and that made all the difference. That night, as Lucy lay on the small platform she had built with her own hands, she stared up into the darkness above, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt full of possibility. She wasn't just surviving inside those walls. She was shaping something real, something meaningful, something hers. And for the first time since she lost everything, Lucy Caldwell didn't feel homeless anymore. She felt like she was finally home. By the time Lucy Caldwell stopped seeing the windmill as a ruin, something else had already begun to shift. She wasn't just rebuilding a structure anymore. She was building a system, a way to live not just day by day but sustainably, independently, on her own terms. And it all started with the gears. Deep inside the windmill, hidden beneath layers of rust and neglect, the old mechanical system remained, worn down, stiff, but not completely dead. The first time Elliot showed her how the mechanism used to work, Lucy didn't just listen. She studied it. Every connection, every movement, every possibility. "You really think this thing can run again?" she asked, her hands brushing against the cold metal. Elliot shrugged. It used to. That was enough for her. Days turned into a new kind of work, slower, more precise. Lucy began cleaning each gear one by one, scraping away rust, oiling joints, testing movement. Her hands, once clumsy and uncertain, now moved with purpose. At first, nothing happened. The gears resisted, groaned, refused to cooperate. But Lucy didn't stop, because by now she understood something most people didn't. Things don't break all at once, and they don't come back all at once either. It's gradual, painfully slow, but possible. One afternoon, after hours of effort, she pushed one of the main gears again. This time, it moved. Just slightly, but it moved. Lucy froze. Her breath caught. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. She pushed again. The gear turned a little more, dragging the others with it in a rough, uneven rhythm. A deep, metallic sound echoed through the windmill. For the first time in decades, it was alive. Lucy let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. And then she laughed. Not because it was perfect, not because it was finished, but because it was working. And that changed everything. Because now, the windmill wasn't just a home. It was a source of power. With Elliot's occasional guidance and her own relentless trial and error, Lucy began adapting the system. She didn't need perfection. She needed function. She rigged a simple mechanism to convert movement into usable energy, just enough to power small, essential things. A faint light. The first time that light flickered on inside the windmill, Lucy stood there in silence, staring at it like it was something unreal. Days ago, she had nothing. Now, she had light, real light. Not borrowed, not temporary. Hers. But she didn't stop there. Because once Lucy realized what was possible, she started thinking bigger, smarter. more intentional. The vertical space inside the windmill became her greatest advantage. Instead of fighting it, she designed around it. She built upward, creating defined levels within the narrow tower, a compact sleeping loft above, a small but functional living area below, hidden storage built directly into the walls to save space. Every inch mattered. Every detail had a purpose. Nothing was wasted. Even airflow became part of her design, carefully guiding wind through the structure to regulate temperature naturally. What once felt cramped now felt efficient. What once felt broken now felt engineered. And outside, a new chapter quietly began. At the base of the windmill, Lucy cleared a small patch of land. The soil was rough, untested, but it was something. She didn't know much about growing food, but just like everything else, she learned. She planted simple crops, easy ones, the kind that didn't require perfection, just consistency. Water, light, time. At first, nothing happened. Then, small signs of life appeared, tiny green shoots pushing through the soil. Fragile but determined, Lucy knelt beside them one morning, her fingers brushing lightly against the leaves. And for a moment, everything felt still. Because what she was building now wasn't just a shelter. It wasn't even just a home anymore. It was a life that could sustain itself. Food, energy, shelter, all created from something the world had abandoned. Weeks passed. The windmill no longer stood as a symbol of decay. It stood as proof that something broken could still function, that something forgotten could still matter. And Lucy? She was no longer the girl who arrived there with $10 and nowhere to go. She had become something else entirely, someone who could take nothing and turn it into something real. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lucy stood outside the windmill, looking up at it. The blades, once frozen, now turned slowly with the wind. Steady, quiet, alive. A soft light glowed from inside. And nearby, the small garden swayed gently. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was hers. Fully hers. And for the first time, Lucy realized something powerful. She didn't just find an opportunity, she created one. At some point, without a clear moment to mark it, Lucy Caldwell stopped surviving and started becoming. It wasn't obvious at first. There was no sudden breakthrough, no single day where everything felt different. It happened in the small things. The way she woke up earlier not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The way her hands moved with confidence instead of hesitation. The way problems no longer felt like walls, but puzzles waiting to be solved. Weeks ago, Lucy had stood in front of that windmill with nothing but fear and desperation. Now, she stood inside it with purpose, and that changed everything. Her reflection, once something she avoided, slowly became something she recognized again. One evening, Lucy caught her reflection in a small piece of polished metal she had hung on the wall. For a second, she froze. The person staring back at her wasn't the same girl who arrived here. Her face was still tired, still marked by everything she had been through. But her eyes, they were different. Stronger, sharper, certain. "I did this," she whispered softly. "Not someone else. Not luck. Her." That realization carried weight. Because for so long, Lucy had believed her life was something that happened to her. Now, she understood something powerful. She could shape it. Every nail she hammered, every wall she reinforced, every mistake she corrected. It all added up to something bigger than just a structure. It was proof that she wasn't powerless, that she never truly was. Even Elliot noticed the change. One afternoon, He leaned against the doorway, watching Lucy adjust part of the upper structure with steady, practiced movements. "You don't hesitate anymore," he said. Lucy glanced down briefly, then back at her work. "I used to wait because I was afraid I'd do it wrong. And now," she tightened a bolt, testing its strength before answering. "Now I know I will," she said calmly. "But I also know I can fix it." Elliot smirked slightly, shaking his head. "That's the difference right there." It wasn't about avoiding failure anymore. It was about facing it again and again until it no longer had power over her. Lucy had stopped fearing mistakes, and in doing so, she had removed the one thing that used to hold her back: fear. Her creativity began to grow alongside her confidence. She didn't just follow what she learned, she adapted it, improved it, turned it into something uniquely hers. A broken ladder became a shelving system. Old fabric turned into insulation. Scraps of glass transformed into small windows that scattered light across the interior. Every solution carried her signature: resourceful, imperfect, but deeply intentional. And the more she built, the more she changed. Physically, she became stronger. The girl who once struggled to carry a single plank of wood could now lift, balance, and build with precision. But the real transformation wasn't in her body. It was in her mind. Lucy no longer saw herself as someone who had lost everything. She saw herself as someone who had rebuilt from nothing. That distinction mattered, because one comes from defeat, the other comes from strength. There were still hard days. Days where the wind was too strong, where something she built didn't hold, where exhaustion crept back in and whispered old doubts into her mind. But those moments didn't break her anymore. They reminded her how far she had come. One night, as she sat inside the softly lit windmill, Lucy looked around at everything she had created. The structure, the warmth, the quiet sense of order, and for the first time, she allowed herself to fully feel it. Pride. Not loud, not overwhelming, but steady, real. She leaned back, exhaling slowly. "I'm not that girl anymore," she said under her breath. And she wasn't. That girl had been lost, unsure, waiting for something or someone to save her. This version of Lucy, she didn't wait. She built, she adapted, she created, and most importantly, she believed in herself. That belief became the foundation of everything else. Stronger than the wood, more reliable than the tools, unshakable. Because now, even if everything around her disappeared, Lucy knew something she didn't know before. She could build it again, from nothing, with her own hands. And that realization, that was the most powerful transformation of all. The day it was finished didn't feel real at first. Lucy Caldwell stood just outside the windmill, her hand resting lightly on the weathered wooden door. The same door she once hesitated to touch, the same place that had once felt like a desperate gamble, now stood as something entirely different. Complete. She took a slow breath. For a moment, memories flooded back all at once. The cold nights, the hunger, the failures, the doubt that almost made her walk away. And then she pushed the door open. Warm light spilled out instantly. Soft, golden, alive. It illuminated every detail, inside details that no one would ever expect from what this place used to be. The wooden walls, once cracked and lifeless, now carried a rich, textured warmth. Carefully placed beams gave structure not just for strength, but for beauty. Above, the loft she built stretched across the upper space, creating a cozy sleeping area that felt safe, protected. Below, A small but perfectly designed living space flowed effortlessly, every inch used with intention. The air no longer felt cold or empty. It felt alive. A gentle hum echoed quietly from the restored gears above, turning slowly with the wind powering the soft lights that gave the space its glow. And in the corner, a small fire flickered, casting dancing shadows across the walls. It wasn't just functional. It was beautiful. Lucy stepped inside, her eyes scanning the space not with disbelief anymore, but with something deeper. Recognition. Because every detail, every corner, every solution came from her. Footsteps approached from outside. Then another, and another. Lucy turned as a small group of people gathered near the entrance neighbors. Curious passers-by, even a few who had once doubted her completely. Elliot stood among them, arms crossed. Silent as always, but his eyes said everything. "Go ahead," Lucy said softly, stepping aside. They entered slowly. And then, everything stopped. No one spoke. Not at first. Their eyes moved across the space, taking in what shouldn't have been possible. A place that was once falling apart. Now felt like a home people would dream of having. "How?" Someone finally whispered. Another shook their head, almost laughing in disbelief. This can't be the same Windmill. But it was. That's what made it powerful. Elliot walked further inside, his gaze moving upward toward the turning mechanism. Then across the structure Lucy had built with her own hands. "You didn't just fix it," he said quietly. Lucy smiled, just slightly. "I told you," she replied. "I was going to change it." But even that didn't fully capture the truth. Because what stood in front of them wasn't just a renovated structure. It was a transformation, not just of wood and metal, but of a life. Outside, the wind picked up slightly, turning the blades above. The soft mechanical rhythm echoed through the space, a steady, calming sound. Proof that everything was working. Everything was real. Lucy stepped back toward the doorway, watching as people continued to look around in awe. But her focus wasn't on them anymore. It was on what this place represented. Because just weeks ago, she had nothing. No home, no direction, no certainty. And now, she had built something most people wouldn't believe even if they saw it. Not because she had resources, not because she had help, but because she refused to give up when giving up would have been easier. As the sun began to set, its light blended with the warm glow inside the windmill, creating a moment that felt almost surreal. Lucy stood there, quietly taking it in. Not the attention, not the reactions, but the journey, every painful step of it. Because that's what made this moment matter. This wasn't luck. This wasn't coincidence. This was earned, built, fought for. And for the first time, Lucy allowed herself to fully accept that. She didn't just survive her lowest point. She turned it into something extraordinary. Something people would remember. Something that would make others stop and think. If she could do that, what am I capable of? The windmill stood tall against the fading sky, no longer forgotten, no longer broken, but reborn, just like the person who now called it home. And as the door remained open, light spilling out into the darkness, it felt like an invitation, a reminder that even the most abandoned places and the most broken lives can become something unbelievably beautiful. Lucy Caldwell's journey was never really about a windmill. It was about a decision made at her lowest point, with nothing but $10 and a choice between comfort and possibility. Most people would have chosen safety, a meal, a place to sleep for the night. But Lucy chose something harder, something uncertain. She chose to believe that even with nothing, she could still create something. And that's the lesson. Because starting from zero isn't the end of your story. It's the moment where everything becomes possible. You don't need perfect conditions. You don't need a detailed plan. You don't even need confidence at the beginning. What you need is the willingness to take the first step, to try, to fail, to try again anyway. Lucy didn't succeed because she had resources. She succeeded because she refused to stop. And in doing so, she proved something powerful. The difference between impossible and possible is persistence. If this story inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button, share this with someone who needs a fresh start, and subscribe for more powerful, life-changing stories. And tell me in the comments, if you only had $10 left, what would you do?